Hello friends, how are you feeling tonight? I hope your body is relaxed and your mind is calm. If sleep feels far away, this story might help you drift gently into rest. Tonight, we were traveling back to a land of mist and quiet mystery, to the windswept plains of ancient Britain, where, thousands of years ago, hands both ordinary and extraordinary shaped one of the world's greatest enigmas, Stonehenge. No kings, no armies, no written words, only stones that still whisper beneath the moonlight. Who placed them? Why did they do it? And what did those silent builders see in the sky that moved them to lift mountains of rock into perfect harmony with the stars? As we wander together through the ancient mists, we'll uncover not just the story of Stonehenge itself, but the people, the forgotten architects who lived, dreamed, and labored in the rhythm of the earth. It's a journey through time, through mystery, and through the quiet heartbeat of human wonder. So, before we begin, please take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and if you enjoy these peaceful journeys into the past, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Your support helps these quiet stories reach dreamers all over the world. Now, let's begin, and step softly into the ancient night of Stonehenge. Long before the first stone was ever lifted into place, long before the winds began to circle across the Salisbury Plain with that quiet, eternal song, the land itself was already waiting, patient, ancient, and alive. The soil was soft and damp beneath the feet of wandering tribes, covered in tall grass that bent like silk when the evening wind brushed across it. Herds of red deer moved through the fog, their shapes barely visible through the drifting mist, and the rivers whispered over smooth stones, carving silver paths that glittered in the dim light of dawn. The air was cool, and each sunrise brought a slow shimmer of gold over the endless green, as if the earth was breathing, dreaming, preparing for something it did not yet know. In those days, there were no villages, only small clusters of shelters made from branches and hides. No roads, but the tracks left by bare feet and wooden carts. No words carved in stone, only songs passed quietly from one mouth to another. The people who lived there were gatherers and hunters, watchers of the sky, and keepers of small fires that burned at the edges of the forest. They did not yet call themselves builders, but in their hearts, they felt the pulse of creation. Each season taught them something new about balance, about survival, about the strange harmony between the land and the sky. When the rains came, they watched how water pooled in the hollows and fed the soil, how the river swelled and sang louder as if telling secrets. When the winter came, they huddled close beside their fires, listening to the breath of the wind as it moved through the hollow bones of trees. They began to understand that time itself was not a line, but a circle, a repeating rhythm of light and shadow, birth and decay. And slowly, within that rhythm, the first thoughts of Stonehenge began to form, not as a monument yet, not as a temple, but as a feeling, a whisper that came from somewhere deep beneath their feet. Perhaps it was the sound of thunder rolling across the plains that stirred it, or the slow turn of the stars above their fires at night. They noticed patterns, the sun returning to the same place on the horizon, the moon swelling and shrinking like a tide of light. They began to feel that the sky was speaking, that the earth was responding, that they were living in the middle of a conversation between heaven and ground. The elders spoke of places where the spirit of the land was strong, places where the wind seemed to pause, where the grass grew in perfect circles, and where the sun seemed to linger longer before it fell below the hills. It was in one of these places, near a gentle rise of earth surrounded by shallow rivers, that the first idea was born, a thought that the heavens could be measured, understood, perhaps even honored. But to do that, they would need to build. The people gathered stones at first not to worship them, but to mark moments, to remember where the sun rose on the longest day, where the moon climbed highest in the coldest night. They began to drag small stones, grey and heavy, from nearby hills and set them upright in the soil, circling their fires like silent watchers. The stones stood like companions, quiet and enduring, each one holding a story of a night, a storm, or a dream. Over time, those who passed by began to add their own stones, each one placed with care, each one given meaning. The place grew, not through command or design, but through a shared feeling that something important was happening there. Children were born near those stones, and old ones were buried beside them, and soon the circle of life and death began to spin around this sacred ground. And as years turned into generations, the people began to wonder, if small stones could hold memory, what might great stones hold? If a circle of hands could lift a single stone, what might a circle of villages do together? They began to dream bigger, and that dream took root like a seed beneath the plain. The land itself seemed to guide them, whispering through the rustle of the grass, through the hum of insects, through the slow shifting of clouds. It told them, in ways they could not explain, that this was the place where earth and sky would one day meet. That belief grew quietly, spreading from camp to camp, until even the children began to speak of a great ring of stones that would stand against time. No one knew how, or when, or who would begin it, but everyone felt it coming, like the first tremor before a storm, like the breath before a word is spoken. And so they waited, watched the stars, listened to the earth, and kept their fires burning through the long, whispering nights of the land before the stones. As generations passed, the quiet people of the plains began to change. The wanderers who once followed the herds slowly learned to stay, to build, to plant, and to wait for harvest. Their hands, once used to pulling nets from rivers or skinning hides by the fire, began to shape clay and carve wood. They became builders not by command, but by instinct, by the simple rhythm of surviving the seasons. They learned that the world responded to patience, that when seeds were pressed into the wet soil and the rains came, life returned in abundance. That when they built homes from woven branches and sealed them with mud, the wind could no longer steal their warmth. With every small creation, they grew closer to the earth that held them, and closer to the idea that the land was alive, aware, and watching. The elders spoke often of the sky, tracing invisible lines between stars as they sat beside the fire. They told of a time before time, when spirits moved between worlds through doors made of stone, when the moon was a watchful eye and the sun a living heart. The children listened with wide eyes, and though they could not see those spirits, they could feel them in the stillness of dusk, when the birds fell silent and the mist began to rise. They began to believe that every shape in nature, the curve of a river, the arch of a tree, the roundness of the moon, carried meaning. To them, nothing was random. The world was a vast and breathing pattern, and they were part of it. Among them were a few who saw the world differently. The watchers, the listeners, the dreamers. They were the ones who noticed how shadows moved, how the stars turned like a great wheel above, how the air felt different when the seasons shifted. Some said these dreamers were guided by spirits. Others said they were simply born with eyes that could see beyond the ordinary. They began to speak of a place, a circle of stones yet to be built, that could hold the memory of the sky, where light and shadow would dance together as the heavens turned. It was not a command but a vision, one that drifted through their dreams like smoke. The dreamers gathered in small groups, marking the ground with sticks, tracing circles in the dirt, watching how the sun fell across their lines. They spoke little, for the vision was still fragile, like the first spark of fire before it catches. In the quiet mornings, when the mist hung low and the air smelled of rain, they would stand on the hills and watch the horizon. They noticed how the sun rose not just anywhere, but in specific places, further north in summer, further south in winter. They saw that the world had rhythm, and that this rhythm could be seen, measured, and remembered. The idea of the stones began to take form again, not as decoration, not as mere markers, but as instruments, tools for remembering the dance of the sky. The dreamers began to teach others what they saw. They showed how the sun's shadow changed with each passing day, how the full moon returned after a silent cycle of darkness, how the seasons could be known by the length of the light. Their voices were soft, but filled with awe, and soon the others began to see it too. The people realized that to build with stone was to speak to time itself, to leave behind something that the wind could not erase. And so, the first stones were chosen. Not yet the mighty sarcens that would come later, but smaller ones gathered from riverbeds and nearby hills. They carried them on wooden sledges, dragging them across wet grass, their breath clouding in the cool morning air. Each stone was placed with care, aligned with something in the sky that only the dreamers understood. They worked not for power, not for glory, but for connection, to the land, to the stars, to whatever unseen presence lingered between them. When they finished, they stood in silence, watching how the dawn light touched the stones, casting long, thin shadows across the ground. In that moment, they felt something shift inside them, a stillness, a harmony that needed no words. They had built nothing grand, yet it felt sacred. The dreamers smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. The people did not yet know that this small circle would awaken something far greater, that their children and their children's children would return to this place for centuries, carrying stones heavier than any they could imagine, guided by the same quiet wonder that had begun here, with the first dreamers of stone. The seasons turned once more, and the winds carried new voices across the plains. The people who had placed the first circle of stones had grown older, their hair touched with ash and their faces lined with years of sun and frost. But the stones still stood where they had placed them, watching, listening, silent as the sky above. Time flowed softly here, each sunrise spilling gold over the grass, each nightfall wrapping the world in a silver hush. And in that stillness the earth began to whisper again. The people heard it in the tremor of the ground after rain, in the low hum of the rivers, in the way birds flew in spirals before the harvest moon. They believed the earth was alive, not only as soil and stone, but as a great spirit, breathing beneath their feet, guiding their hands in quiet ways they did not always understand. One morning, when the mist was thick and pale as milk, a child wandering near the circle placed her palm on one of the stones. She said it felt warm, as though something living was trapped inside. The elders smiled, for they too had felt that pulse, a warmth that was not of the sun, but of something deeper. They began to speak of the stones as guardians, as messengers between the worlds of earth and sky. And slowly, a purpose began to take shape in their minds. They would build not only for the heavens, but for the land itself, to honor it, to listen to it, to keep its memory alive. As their numbers grew, small settlements began to form around the ancient circle, huts of wood and clay, smoke rising from hearths at dawn. The people learned to shape flint into sharper tools, to build stronger sledges, to bind rope from twisted reeds. They watched the stars from the doorways of their homes, teaching their children the patterns of the constellations. They sang songs of the stones, songs that blended with the sighing wind until no one could tell where the music ended and the world began. Every act of their daily life became part of something larger. Even the simple act of grinding grain or lighting fire was done with reverence, for they felt watched, protected, connected. One night, the dreamers gathered again, this time not in secret but under a wide open sky. A great fire burned in the center, sparks rising like stars into the dark. The oldest among them spoke softly, his voice carried by the wind. He said that the earth had chosen them, that their task was not to own it, but to listen, and to build as the earth asked, not as they willed. He spoke of a dream he had seen, of great stones, taller than a man, standing in a vast ring, casting shadows that would mark the journey of the sun itself. The others listened, their faces lit by firelight, and though no one could imagine how such massive stones could ever be moved, they felt in their hearts that it would be done, not by force, but by unity, the strength of many hands guided by one purpose. In the following days, they began to wander further, seeking stones unlike any they had known before. They found them in distant hills, enormous boulders of grey sarsen and bluestone, buried in earth, or resting beneath layers of moss. Touching them filled the people with awe. The stones seemed ancient beyond comprehension, born of mountains and rivers that no longer existed. They began to believe these stones were gifts, waiting patiently for them, waiting to be awakened. And so the great task began to form in their minds. Though years would pass before it truly began, they started preparing shaping tools, gathering timber, teaching the young the art of balance and the wisdom of listening to the wind. They spoke often of what they would build, not as builders, but as caretakers of a promise. Each night, as fires flickered and embers glowed, the sound of quiet chanting filled the air. Songs that spoke of the stones that would rise, of the circle that would touch both sky and soil. Their voices mingled with the hum of insects and the distant cry of nightbirds. And above them, the stars turned slowly, marking the endless wheel of time. The people did not yet know that their vision would take generations, that some would live and die without seeing it complete. But they were content, for they had heard the call of the earth, and they had answered, not with words, but with faith, with patience, and with the steady rhythm of hearts beating in harmony with the land that would one day hold the great stones. The years rolled on, like the slow breath of the earth, and what had once been a dream whispered beside small fires became the pulse of an entire people. The circle of stones that marked the first light of midsummer had grown quiet, covered in moss. But it was not forgotten. Every season, travelers came from distant valleys to stand among the stones, to touch them, to leave offerings of grain, shells, and carved bone. They came not for worship, but to remember, for this place had become a meeting ground where stories and songs passed from one generation to the next. And among those stories was a single promise, that one day the great stones would rise, and the sky would once again speak to the earth. Across the plains the people had changed. They had grown in number and in skill. Their homes were stronger, their tools sharper, their herds larger. Yet with all their progress, they still looked to the horizon and felt something unfinished, a yearning to fulfill the vision of their ancestors. The dreamers were gone now. Their bones returned to the soil, but their words lingered in the minds of those who carried their fire. They knew where the stones lay waiting, far to the west, beyond rivers, forests, and hills, heavy as mountains, silent as the moon. And though the distance was vast, they no longer saw it as impossible, for the call of the earth had never ceased. It hummed beneath their feet, urging them to begin. It started one morning, when the mist clung low to the ground, and the grass glistened with dew. The new elders gathered the strongest among them, men and women with hands hardened by work and eyes bright with purpose. They spoke of the task before them, not as a command, but as a journey, a gift to the generations yet unborn. The circle must grow, the great stones must stand, and so they prepared. They crafted ropes thick as an arm, sledges made from the trunks of oaks, and rollers carved smooth from fallen trees. They tested each one with smaller stones, learning how to shift weight with rhythm, not with force. They learned that the land itself could guide their movements if they listened, if they moved in harmony with its shape. When all was ready, they set out, hundreds of them, with sledges creaking and ropes groaning, voices murmuring in unison, their feet pressing deep tracks into the damp soil. The stones they sought were vast blue stones, sleeping in the Preseli hills, cold and ancient, each one the weight of many lives. The journey took seasons, through forests of beech and ash, across marshes where mist rose like ghosts, and along rivers that gleamed beneath the pale sun. Many fell ill. Some were lost, but they did not turn back, for they carried not only stone, but belief, a belief that the world was speaking through them. At night, they camped beneath the stars, singing softly to keep their spirits warm. Songs that told of the first circle, of the child who felt the stone's heartbeat, of the dreamers who saw patterns in the sky. The younger ones listened with awe, their imaginations filling with light and shadow. They began to see the stones not as burdens, but as companions, as sleeping beings that must be awakened and brought home. And when the moon was full, they would dance beside the river, moving in slow circles that mirrored the heavens above. Every step a prayer, every breath a promise. Months became years, and still they dragged the stones, across land and water, through pain and rain, until one morning they reached the plain, where the wind moved in endless waves, and the sun stretched far and clear. They set down the stones one by one. The sound of them meeting the earth echoed for miles, a deep, low thud that seemed to awaken the land itself. The elders wept quietly, for they knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of something that would outlast them all. The people rested, their hands blistered, their shoulders torn, yet their hearts were full. The great stones had come home. The land that had waited so long now seemed to breathe easier, as if recognizing its own reflection. And in the stillness of that first night, as the fires burned low and the stars wheeled above, a single thought filled every mind. That what they had done was not for power, not for glory, but for remembrance, for connection, for the quiet promise between heaven and earth that began long ago and would never be broken. The first blue stones rested upon the plain, their grey faces cool beneath the morning sun, and the people gathered around them, silent, watching, feeling the weight of time pressing lightly upon their shoulders. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if it too wanted to witness the birth of something eternal. They traced the outlines of the stones with fingers, noticing every curve and imperfection, marveling at how the mountains had shaped them over countless centuries, how the rivers had polished them, and how now they rested in their hands, waiting for the ritual that would awaken their presence. Each stone was more than rock. It was a memory of the hills it had left behind, a story of rivers and rain, of frost and sun, and the people understood that moving it had not been an act of strength alone, but of respect, of patience, and of deep listening. The air shimmered faintly in the early light, carrying the scent of wet grass and wood smoke, and as the sun climbed higher, shadows began to stretch across the plain, long and thin like the fingers of the past reaching toward the future. The elders spoke softly, explaining that each stone must face the sunrise on Midsummer's Day, that each shadow must fall precisely where it was intended, and that this alignment was not merely practical, but sacred, a conversation between earth and sky that would continue long after they themselves had returned to dust. The people worked slowly, rolling stones into place with a rhythm that echoed the turning of the heavens, a steady cadence of breath, footfall, and song, every movement measured, careful, full of reverence. And as the stones shifted, the light caught on their surfaces, painting patterns across the ground, shapes that seemed to dance, like the wind itself had learned to move in harmony with human hands. Children watched with wide eyes, their fingers tracing imaginary paths along the shadows, learning without words the lessons of patience, of observation, and of wonder. And the adults felt a quiet pride, not in accomplishment, but in the act of bearing witness to something far greater than themselves. At midday, the sun hung high, and the bluestones cast shorter, sharper shadows, the patterns changing as though the earth itself were breathing. The people paused to rest, and in the quiet, one could hear the faint hum of life all around. The river flowing steadily, the birds singing softly in the trees, the insects moving through the grass in delicate rhythm. Even the stones seemed to vibrate slightly, a low resonance that matched the heartbeat of those who had carried them. And in that resonance, every person felt a connection, not only to each other, but to generations past and generations yet to come, for the stones held memory and the plain held promise. And together, they sang a song of enduring time. As the afternoon waned, they began to notice that some stones seemed to catch the light differently, glinting with subtle color hints of blue and green, hidden in the surface remnants of the hills and rivers from which they had come. And the dreamers whispered that this was the spirit of the land, reminding them that nothing in the world was ever truly separate. That stone and soil, river and sky, human and earth were intertwined in a delicate pattern that could be seen if one only took the time to notice. And the workers nodded, feeling the truth of it in the calluses of their hands, the ache of their shoulders, the warmth of the sun on their backs. Evening came slowly, casting long golden shadows that stretched like fingers across the stones, and the people gathered around a small fire, resting and reflecting, speaking softly of the work they had done, of the patterns of shadow and light, of the songs that had guided them through the day. The elders reminded them that this was just the beginning, that the stones would grow taller, circles larger, alignments more precise, and yet they would never forget this first day, the first moment when the blue stones met the plain, and the sun and shadow began their ancient dance. And as night fell, the mist curling gently around the stones, the people drifted to sleep beside the fires, listening to the soft rustle of wind through grass, to the quiet murmur of rivers, to the low hum of the earth beneath them, carrying dreams of shadow, light, and the endless turning of the heavens above, knowing that when they awoke, the stones would be waiting, steadfast, patient, and alive. Night settled gently over the plain, wrapping the stones in a soft veil of silver mist, and the people lay beside their fires, listening to the quiet hum of the world around them. The river glimmering faintly under the moonlight, the trees whispering secrets through the rustle of leaves, and the stars wheeling above like slow, watchful eyes. It was in these hours that the dreamers felt most alive, most attuned to the pulse of the earth, for the plain seemed to speak to them in subtle ways, a tremor beneath a foot, a chill in the wind, a sudden shift of shadow that no one else might notice, yet everyone could feel the weight of its presence. And in that presence, they understood something ancient, something that had existed long before they were born, and would endure long after their bones returned to the soil. The elders told stories by the fire, tales of ancestors whose hands had shaped the first circles of stone, whose eyes had read the patterns of sun and moon, whose hearts had held the memory of the land even when their bodies had faded. They spoke softly so as not to disturb the stones, for it was believed that the stones themselves listened, absorbing the words, the intentions, the hope of the people who gathered near them, and in return, they whispered back in ways that only the attentive could perceive. Sometimes it was the wind sighing through the grass, sometimes a distant bird calling in the night, sometimes the subtle tremor of a stone as though shifting slightly to acknowledge a passing presence. And those who were attuned knew to pause, to breathe, to listen, and in that listening, they found guidance. Over weeks, the people began to sense patterns in the land itself, the subtle rise and fall of hills, the course of streams, the placement of trees and rocks, all forming an invisible map that guided where the next stones should be placed, where the circle might expand, where shadows would fall at dawn and dusk. They realized that the plain was not simply a space to build upon, but a partner in their work, a living participant in the creation of something that transcended human effort. The elders taught that to move stones without understanding the land was to act in vain, and so the people learned to observe, to track the light, to measure the earth with their eyes and hands, and to move as though they were part of a greater rhythm. Children were included in these lessons, though they were often too small to help lift stones. They could watch, mimic, and memorize, learning the subtle art of seeing, feeling, and understanding. They traced the shadow of one stone with a stick, marking how it changed over the day. And in their play, they carried forward knowledge that had no words, only experience and quiet attention. And the elders smiled, knowing that the future would come not just from strength, but from understanding, patience, and respect for the unseen forces that guided their work. As the moon passed through its phases, the people found that each night offered a new insight. The wind might shift, revealing a hidden slope. The rain might soften the ground, making a stone easier to roll. The stars might align in unexpected ways, offering a clue to the timing of their work. Every action became a meditation, every breath a dialogue with the earth, and the stones responded, silently, immovable, yet alive in a way that spoke to the mind and heart. They began to leave small offerings at the base of the stones, carved bones, pieces of clay, simple meals of bread and berries, as tokens of respect and acknowledgement, believing that the stones and the land would remember these gestures and that in return, the spirits of the place would guide them to harmony and success. Through these nights, the people felt themselves connected not only to the plain and the stones, but to every generation that had come before and would come after, a vast circle of existence that stretched beyond comprehension. And in this awareness, they found calm, purpose, and wonder, knowing that the labor of their hands was part of something far larger than themselves, a quiet and enduring conversation between earth, stone, and sky. And when the first light of dawn touched the mist, the blue stones glimmered faintly, as if smiling, and the people rose ready to continue their work, carrying with them the whispers of the ancients which would guide every step, every movement, and every decision in the long journey of building a circle that would one day endure through millennia. With each passing season, the work on the stones became more than labor. It became a rhythm, a meditation, a communion with both earth and sky. The people moved as one, hands and feet synchronized to the slow cadence of thought and breath, each step carefully measured, each pull and lift guided by patience rather than force, for they understood that a stone could not be hurried, that even the smallest tremor might disrupt the harmony they sought to create. They learned to listen to the subtle sounds of the land, the soft creak of a sledge on wet grass, the distant murmur of a river, the whisper of wind against a stone, and they shaped their movements around these cues, finding a gentle balance between effort and stillness. Even children, though small, found a place in this rhythm, carrying sticks to roll stones in practice, watching and imitating, learning the unspoken language of motion that would one day allow them to participate fully in the raising of the great stones. The elders taught that the earth itself had a pulse, a timing that could not be forced, but only understood, and they showed how to read it, how to sense the subtle give beneath a stone, the shift in the soil, the resistance of a slope, and to move in harmony with it. When the work began in earnest each morning, the people chanted softly, low and measured sounds that blended with the groan of the sledges and the scrape of stones over rollers. It was not song for entertainment, but a tool for synchronization, a shared breath that aligned muscles and hearts, guiding the stones forward as if they, too, were participants in the ritual. Long hours were spent adjusting, testing, and retesting, for even a few inches could alter the alignment, the shadow, the sacred pattern that had been whispered to them through generations of observation. They mapped the movements of the sun across the sky, marking the points where its light would fall on midsummer's morning, on the winter solstice, on nights when the full moon rose bright and clear. Each stone became part of a larger story, each movement a verse in a song of connection, a dialogue between human intention and the patient will of the land. In the quiet moments when hands rested on cool stones and eyes followed the curve of a hill, the people felt a sense of unity that went beyond mere teamwork, a harmony that embraced generations past and yet to come. They spoke softly of ancestors who had begun the dream of the first child, who had felt the heartbeat of a stone, and of the distant mountains where the blue stones had slept for countless years before being summoned to the plain. Every gesture, every push, every adjustment was done with reverence, as if they were coaxing memory from the rock itself, awakening a story that had waited patiently for them to arrive. Evenings brought reflection, fires burning low, embers casting flickering light on faces worn but serene, and the people would share observations, small discoveries, subtle shifts in the way light fell on a stone, or the way a shadow stretched differently in the late afternoon. These notes would guide the next day's work, ensuring that every action remained in harmony with the invisible rhythm of the earth. Songs continued to rise, now more gentle, more melodic, blending with the hum of insects, the distant cry of nightbirds, and the whispering of the grass, a lullaby for both stone and soul. And through it all, the stones began to speak in their own way, not with words, but with presence, with weight, with the slow, deliberate casting of shadows that hinted at something eternal. The people felt it, this quiet acknowledgement, and in their hearts, they knew that they were part of something far greater than themselves. The rhythm of hands, guided by breath and mind and earth, had become a living pulse, a dance of patience and reverence, a bridge between the fleeting lives of humans and the enduring memory of stone. By dawn, when the mists rolled across the plain once more, the circle of blue stones glimmered faintly in the soft light, aligned not by chance, but by the steady, unwavering rhythm of hands that listened, waited, and worked in harmony with the ancient land that had called them here. As the circle of stones slowly took shape, the people began to notice something subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable, a sense that the stones themselves breathed, not with air, but with a quiet pulse that seemed to echo the rhythm of the earth beneath them. They felt it in the coolness that radiated from the surface at dawn, in the faint vibration that passed through the soil. When footsteps came close in the way, sunlight glimmered along certain edges, revealing hidden hues of blue and green, colors that seemed to shift with the changing day. And the elders whispered that this was no accident, that the stones carried memory, and that memory was alive. The people began to treat the stones as companions rather than mere objects, speaking softly to them, touching them with reverence, circling them in measured steps, offering small gifts of carved wood, clay, or grain. Gestures meant to acknowledge the presence within, and in return, they felt guidance, subtle nudges in movement, suggestions in the way shadows fell, confirmations in the alignment of earth and sky. Children played nearby, yet carefully, learning from the adults how to respect the pulse of the stones, how to notice the slightest change in light or shadow, how to move without disturbing the harmony, and even in play, they absorbed lessons of patience, attentiveness, and quiet observation, their laughter blending with the hum of wind through grass, becoming part of the living music of the plain, a gentle accompaniment to the breathing of stone. The dreamers had long since passed, but their vision persisted, carried in the memories of those who had witnessed the first placements, in the songs that rose from fire circles at night, in the careful repetition of every measured motion during the day, and the people began to feel that each stone was an instrument in a dialogue with the heavens, a silent translator of cosmic rhythms into shapes and shadows on the earth. The blue stones, drawn from distant hills, seemed to respond differently than the smaller stones that had first been placed. Heavier, older, more patient, as if they had waited in quiet for centuries, now awakened by human hands, and when moved, they radiated a profound sense of weight and presence, an almost conscious awareness of the effort required, guiding the people to slow down, to breathe, to synchronize their strength with the rhythm of the land. The elders taught that the secret was not force, but listening, that every stone had its own rhythm, its own story, and that the people must become attuned to both, sensing the subtle cues in the ground, in the air, in the play of sunlight, learning to coax the stones gently into place rather than command them. During long afternoons, when shadows stretched and the sun dipped low, the people paused to rest beside the stones, placing hands upon cool surfaces, feeling the texture, the history, the quiet heartbeat beneath. And sometimes, in those moments, a sense of wonder swept through them, as though they were touching eternity itself. It was not a grand or dramatic revelation, but a soft, steady realization that they were part of something far greater than their daily toil, that the stones were both teachers and companions, and that the act of moving and placing them was itself a meditation, a bridge between human effort and the enduring presence of the natural world. Evenings were devoted to reflection, the fires burning low, sparks drifting into the night air like tiny stars, voices soft with awe, telling stories of distant mountains, of the rivers that had carried the stones, of ancestors who had first felt the pulse of the land, and of the vision that had guided every hand and every footstep. Songs rose gently, not as celebration, but as acknowledgement, a chorus in honor of the stones and the earth, blending with the sounds of night, the rustle of grass, the croak of frogs, the distant call of owls, all forming a symphony that seemed to echo the very breathing of the plain. And as the people slept beneath the stars, the stones stood silently, patient and enduring, yet alive with the rhythm of the work, the whispers of those who had touched them, and the quiet acknowledgement of the earth, a living testament to the harmony that could be achieved when human hearts, hands, and minds moved in careful alignment with the enduring pulse of the world. And in that stillness, the plain itself seemed to exhale, a long, slow breath that carried both gratitude and promise across the soft hills, through the mist, and into the dreams of all who would continue the sacred labor of the circle. With the stones now forming a growing circle, the people began to notice the delicate dialogue between the earth and the heavens, each sunrise and sunset revealing new patterns, shadows stretching and shrinking, pointing toward invisible lines in the sky. And the elders taught that these were not mere coincidences, but messages, signs from the cosmos, guiding the placement of the stones, teaching them to align with the sun, the moon, and the stars. Every morning, the workers would pause to observe the first light spilling across the plain, noting how it fell on each stone, tracing invisible paths that seemed to shimmer across the ground. And as days turned into weeks, these observations became lessons, passed from elder to child, from one generation to the next, until knowledge of celestial rhythm was as familiar as the songs of birds or the flow of the river. Children learned to track the movement of the moon, marking its passage across the sky with small sticks or stones, noticing how it rose higher in summer and lower in winter, how its glow could cast long shadows that shifted gradually, teaching patience and careful observation. The adults, too, observed aligning each new stone according to subtle celestial markers, noting how the tilt of the sun at midsummer illuminated a particular edge, how the shadow of one standing stone fell perfectly upon another, forming shapes that echoed the patterns of the heavens. And in this work, they discovered that the plain itself had a voice guiding them, offering subtle corrections, whispering the secrets of balance and harmony. The dreamers who had long since passed seemed present in spirit, their quiet teachings alive in every careful adjustment, every measured breath, every soft word of guidance. By observing the sky, the people felt a deeper connection not only to the stones beneath their hands, but to the vast universe above, as though the circle they were building was a bridge between human life and the infinite patterns of time and space. Evenings were spent lying on the grass, eyes tracing constellations, hearts syncing with the slow turning of the stars, learning that the cycle of seasons was reflected in the dance of light across their growing monument. Occasionally, travelers came from distant lands to observe the work, marveling at the careful alignment, the patience, the reverence, yet they did not fully understand that this was not merely construction, but dialogue, a meditation, a careful listening to both stone and sky. The people taught them gently, demonstrating the shadows at sunset, the rising moon, the points where stars would pass directly above key stones, and some stayed, learning the rhythms themselves, joining in the soft songs and chants that kept the movements precise, the stones and people united in purpose. As the circle expanded, certain stones were placed in direct alignment with the solstices, marking the longest day and the longest night, guiding planting and harvest cycles, guiding the rhythm of life itself. They noticed how during particular nights, the full moon cast light that made the blue stones glow faintly, reflecting blue veins in their surfaces, a subtle reminder of distant hills from which they had come. Such moments were met with quiet reverence, songs sung softly, and hands lightly tracing the stone surfaces, acknowledging both the distant past and the unfolding present. Through observation of celestial patterns, the people came to understand the profound patience of the universe, and they mirrored that patience in their labor. No stone was moved too quickly, no alignment adjusted without thought. They learned to wait for the precise hour, to adjust gradually, to watch the interplay of light and shadow, and to respect that each celestial moment carried significance. In this careful attention, the stones became more than mere markers. They became instruments of memory, of connection, of understanding that human life was part of a much larger rhythm, a dance of stone, sky, and soul. As night fell, and the constellations wheeled silently above the plain, the people gathered around small fires, tracing the patterns with fingers in the air, telling stories of ancestors and stars, teaching the children that the heavens themselves guided their work, and that patience and observation were as sacred as strength and skill. The stones stood quietly, aligned not only with each other, but with the cosmic order, breathing softly beneath the moonlight, their silent presence a testament to the careful eyes and patient hands that had coaxed them into place. And the people slept beneath the sky hearts, attuned to the slow, enduring rhythm of the universe, ready to continue their sacred labor with renewed wonder at the patterns in the sky. By the time the circle had grown larger, the plain itself seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a subtle resonance that carried through the stones and across the grass, and the people began to notice that their voices, when raised softly in song, blended with that resonance, creating a harmony that was both calming and enlivening, as if the earth itself was joining in the chorus. They had long sung while moving stones, chants measured to the rhythm of breath and footfall, but now they discovered that certain melodies caused shadows to shift more clearly, that the alignment of stones seemed to respond subtly to the cadence of their voices, and so singing became both ritual and tool, a gentle guidance for hands, hearts, and stone. Children sat nearby, humming along or clapping softly to maintain the rhythm, learning without instruction the delicate interplay between sound, movement, and placement. The elders explained that the earth had a memory, that it could sense respect and intention, and that harmonious song amplified that connection, making each action more precise, more attuned, more enduring. Even small deviations in tone or tempo were noticed and corrected, teaching the people the power of focus, the subtle influence of vibration, the soft but undeniable effect of reverent attention. Morning brought new lessons. The wind, shifting from east to west, carried faint tones through the grass and stones, whispering like a distant choir. The people discovered that by raising their voices in gentle song at particular points, the stones seemed to speak in return, a vibration that could be felt through the hands, feet, and earth beneath them. Some said it was magic, others said it was simply the natural resonance of weight and shape, yet all agreed on its effect. It taught patience, it guided placement, it connected the human heart with the pulse of the land. Days stretched into weeks as this practice continued. Stones were nudged slightly to catch the wind or sun. In new ways, children learned to recognize the subtle hums beneath their feet, and elders would sometimes stop to close their eyes, hand upon a stone, listening deeply, feeling the echo of centuries reverberate back to them. Songs became more intricate, weaving together tones that mimicked bird calls, the rustle of leaves, the flow of water, and the people believed that these melodies ensured the stones and the land were in harmony, that the very act of sound could awaken the memory and presence within each rock. During these hours, small ceremonies arose, marking the completion of a particularly difficult placement, or the first alignment of shadow at dawn. Fires were lit. The group sang softly, and offerings were left. A sprig of heather, a bowl of water, a handful of grain, tokens of respect for both the land and the enduring memory of the stones. These moments were not grand celebrations, but quiet acknowledgements. Pauses that reinforced the connection between people, stone, and sky, a subtle rhythm that would carry on in the work to come. At twilight, the plain glimmered under the soft glow of the setting sun, the blue stones casting long, wavering shadows across the grass. And as the people sang, the wind seemed to shift in time, with their voices a delicate interplay that made the very air feel alive. The elders spoke of patience, of observation, of listening to the smallest cues in sound and movement, and the younger generation absorbed these lessons through presence rather than instruction, learning that care, reverence, and harmony were as essential to the work as strength and skill. Nightfall brought calm and reflection. Fires glowed low, shadows danced slowly across the stones, and stories were told in whispers of ancestors who had first dreamed of the circle, of distant mountains, of rivers and winds that had shaped the bluestones over millennia. These stories, combined with the songs and chants, wove an invisible thread connecting past, present, and future, and the people understood that their labor was part of a much larger pattern, one that encompassed earth, stone, sky, and spirit. As sleep approached, they lay beside the stones, listening to the faint echo of their songs mingling with the night wind, feeling the quiet pulse beneath their hands, and in that stillness, they were reminded that the circle was alive, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that invited care, reverence, and patience. And with hearts attuned to the rhythm of stone and wind, the people rested ready to rise again at dawn, carrying the harmony of song into the next day of sacred labor, each note a bridge between human effort and the enduring memory of the land. As the seasons turned and the circle grew ever more complete, a quiet ritual emerged, born of both necessity and reverence. Each morning, before the sun had risen above the horizon, a small group would rise from their simple tents or beds beneath the sky and walk in silence toward the stones, their footsteps soft against the dew-soaked grass, their breath visible in the crisp morning air. They called themselves the Watchers, and their task was simple yet sacred: to greet the dawn, to feel the first light upon the stones, to notice the subtle shifts of shadow, and to record in their minds and on soft clay tablets the patterns that unfolded. These observations would guide the day's work, the placement of new stones, and the refinement of alignments, ensuring that the circle remained in harmony with both the earth and sky. The Watchers moved slowly, deliberately, allowing the wind, the faint murmur of rivers, and the soft whisper of grass to fill their senses. Each stone seemed to respond to their presence, as if awakening with recognition, and the elders taught that the stones could sense attention and respect. A gentle touch along a cool surface, a whispered observation of a shadow, a soft song at the edge of dawn. All of these, the elders explained, were ways of communicating with the stones, coaxing them into alignment with unseen forces guiding them to their destined places. Children often joined in, learning to become watchers themselves. They would rise quietly, eyes wide with wonder, noticing how the first light painted patterns across the plain, how the shadows shifted imperceptibly as the sun climbed, and how the stones seemed to hum faintly beneath their hands, carrying the pulse of earth, sky, and memory. They learned that patience and careful observation could reveal secrets invisible to hurried or careless eyes, and that listening with both heart and body was as important as strength in labor. By the time the sun fully rose, the Watchers had already traced countless invisible lines, marked the positions of shadows, and whispered guidance to those preparing for the day's work. The main group would gather shortly after, following the subtle maps laid by the early observers, moving stones with care, guided by both measurement and intuition, and the circle slowly grew, each new addition in dialogue with the land, the sky, and the human heart. Evenings were equally sacred. As the sun sank low and shadows stretched across the plain, the Watchers gathered again, noting the fading light, the slow change of color upon the blue stones, the faint glimmer that hinted at veins of blue and green within. They sang softly, a meditation more than a chant, their voices mingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds, creating a gentle resonance that echoed across the plain and seemed to settle deep within the stones themselves. Stories were shared by firelight, recounting tales of the earliest dreamers who had first felt the heartbeat of stone, of ancestors who had guided the work through vision and patience, and of distant hills where the blue stones had slept for centuries before being called to the plain. In this quiet reflection, the people felt the continuity of time, the enduring presence of the land, and the invisible thread that linked them to all who had come before and all who would follow. Through this practice, the Watchers became more than observers. They became guardians, interpreters, and connectors, their minds and hearts attuned to patterns invisible to most, their understanding guiding every careful movement. They taught that to witness dawn was not merely to see light, but to enter into dialogue with the eternal rhythms of the universe, to feel the pulse of stone and earth, to align human intention with cosmic order, and in doing so, to prepare the circle to endure for countless generations. And when night finally fell, and the stars wheeled slowly overhead, the Watchers rested among the stones, feeling the faint vibration of earth beneath them, the cool presence of bluestone beside them, the soft whisper of wind through the grass, knowing that they were part of a living continuum, a bridge between human effort and the patient, enduring breath of the world, and that with each dawn they would awaken once more to continue the sacred dialogue of stone, sky, and soul. By now, the circle of stones had begun to speak in ways that transcended words, their silent presence shaping the rhythm of daily life and guiding each movement with subtle authority. The people had learned to read the shadows cast by the rising and setting sun, noticing the slightest shifts, the angles that lengthened or shortened as the earth turned. And the elders taught that these shadows were more than mere absence of light. They were guides, messages from the cosmos, markers of time, and gentle reminders that patience and observation were the true keys to understanding. Each morning before the labor began, groups would gather to study these patterns, tracing long lines along the ground with sticks or fingers, recording subtle differences in clay tablets, whispering observations to one another, and noticing how even the smallest misalignment of a stone could change the language of shadows. Children joined in, wide-eyed and curious, following the elders' gestures, learning to sense the dialogue between light and stone, to interpret the silent messages of the plane, and to understand that every movement carried weight, not just physically, but spiritually. The elders reminded them that the language of shadows was subtle and patient, teaching lessons in humility and careful attention. No gesture was too small, no pause too long, and every observation was part of a growing body of knowledge that had been handed down through generations, preserved in memory and careful record. As they traced the long fingers of sunlight stretching across the stones, they began to perceive patterns, circles, triangles, lines connecting distant points that spoke of harmony, of alignment, of the hidden order in the world around them. By midday, the shadows shifted, revealing new angles, new possibilities. Stones that had seemed settled in one position now took on different relationships with one another, and the people adjusted slowly, gently, as if coaxing the land itself into cooperation. Songs continued to rise softly, harmonizing with the hum of earth and wind, guiding hands and hearts alike. The circle grew not just in size, but in meaning, each stone contributing to the complex dialogue between light, shadow, and human intent. Evenings were devoted to reflection, quiet discussion, and observation under fading light. Fires burned low embers, casting gentle illumination on the faces of those gathered, and stories were told of distant hills where the bluestones had slept for centuries, of ancestors who had first deciphered these patterns, of the lessons that patience and attention had brought to every generation. The children traced lines in the soft earth, following the angles of shadows as they faded, imagining the stories the stones might tell if they could speak, and learning that listening required more than ears. It required the heart and the careful observation of small, fleeting details. As night fell and stars wheeled overhead, the language of shadows became even more apparent in the dim light, as moonbeams stretched across the plain, revealing hidden lines and subtle alignments invisible by day. The people lay beside the stones, fingers brushing cool surfaces, feeling the quiet vibration of earth beneath them, hearing the faint resonance of stone, and understanding that they were part of a long, unbroken continuum. The shadows had become teachers, companions, guides, and in their quiet presence, the people learned that knowledge was not always spoken, that understanding could unfold slowly, and that even the simplest observation carried profound significance. Through this patient engagement, the circle became more than a collection of stones. It became a living, breathing map of time and space, a reflection of human care and cosmic rhythm intertwined. And as the plain fell silent beneath the stars, the people slept with hearts attuned to the slow, deliberate conversation of shadow and light, knowing that tomorrow, as the sun rose again, they would wake to continue the sacred dialogue, guided by the enduring and silent wisdom of the stones. By now, the people had begun to sense that the plain held more than what could be seen with the eye that beneath the soil, beneath the grass. Beneath the stones themselves, there were currents, gentle flows of energy, subtle shifts of earth and water invisible, yet perceptible to those who moved with patience and attention. The elders spoke of these hidden currents as guides, as quiet forces that could either aid or hinder their work, and the people learned to sense them with hands, feet, and intuition, feeling the give of the soil beneath rollers, the firmness of a stone as it rested on a slight incline, the way vibrations traveled across the ground as they lifted or shifted. Early in the morning, before the sun had risen fully, the workers would kneel beside stones, placing palms flat against the cool surface, closing their eyes and breathing slowly, as if listening to a subtle heartbeat beneath the earth. Some felt a gentle tremor, a faint warmth, a rhythm that matched their own pulse, and the elders explained that these were the hidden currents, guides that could lead to perfect placement if observed with care. Children, too, learned to kneel quietly, feeling the vibrations beneath their hands, sensing the subtle feedback of the land, and understanding that patience and stillness were as essential as strength and coordination. These currents guided many decisions: the precise angle at which a stone should rest, the small adjustments needed to align with sunlight, the timing of a push or roll. Even minor misjudgments could disrupt harmony, yet careful observation and respect for the currents allowed the people to move each stone with minimal effort, as if the land itself were assisting, offering gentle guidance in return for reverence and attention. At midday, the sun highlighted slight depressions, ridges, and natural contours that had been invisible before. Elders instructed the workers to follow these subtle guides, letting the land itself dictate small corrections to placement, always moving slowly, always pausing to feel the pulse beneath their feet. The songs that accompanied lifting and shifting took on new purpose. They were not just rhythmic, but also attuned to the currents, soft vibrations echoing through the hands and arms, amplifying the connection between human effort and Earth's response. Evenings were devoted to quiet reflection, to mapping the invisible pathways, to understanding where water might flow in the coming rains, where the ground was firmer or softer, and where alignment with the sky's rhythms might be most precise. Fires burned low, smoke curling gently into the cool night air, and the children traced invisible lines with sticks, imagining the hidden currents beneath their fingers, learning that the unseen could guide action as powerfully as what was visible. As moonlight washed over the stones, the people lay beside them, sensing the slow hum beneath, whispering songs that mingled with the wind and contemplating the subtle energy that shaped the land. In the hush of night, it became clear that the currents were not separate from the people. They were part of the same living system, responding to care, intention, and rhythm, teaching lessons in patience, observation, and reverence. By understanding the hidden currents, the circle became more than stone arranged in patterns. It became an embodiment of cooperation between human and earth, a careful dialogue that required attention, humility, and harmony. And as the people drifted into sleep beneath the stars, the plane remained awake, the subtle vibrations flowing quietly beneath the surface. A reminder that true understanding often lies beneath what is seen, and that to move with care is to move in concert with the world itself. As the circle neared completion, a profound awareness began to settle over the people, a sense that they were not alone in their labor, that the land and the stones held echoes of those who had come before. The elders spoke of ancestors, not only in flesh, but in spirit, whose hands and eyes had guided early placements, whose visions had sparked the dream of the circle, and whose memory lingered in the hum of the earth and the quiet pulse of stone. Each time a new stone was lifted or nudged, it was done with a whispered acknowledgement of those who had first envisioned the alignment, and a careful listening for guidance that might come from beyond the visible. In the early hours, when mist clung to the plain and dew glistened on the grass, small groups would kneel beside stones, closing their eyes, speaking softly in honor of those who had labored long before them. Some felt faint warmth beneath their palms, subtle vibrations, or the delicate echo of a remembered song, and the elders taught that these were whispers from ancestors, gentle affirmations that the work was proceeding as it should. Children, wide-eyed and reverent, joined in these moments, sensing a presence that could not be seen but could be felt, learning that labor was both physical and spiritual, and that the care taken today honored generations past and future alike. The circle itself seemed to respond to this acknowledgement. Stones shifted imperceptibly under careful hands, aligning more perfectly with their neighbors, their edges catching sunlight at precise angles, their surfaces revealing veins and hues previously unnoticed. Even the wind seemed to carry a softer, almost deliberate hum across the plain, and birds that had long observed the work from a distance perched quietly on nearby trees, as if participating in the reverence. Songs took on a new depth, blending human voices with the rhythm of earth and air, incorporating soft whispers, the tapping of small sticks, and the gentle scraping of stone against soil. Every note, every gesture was imbued with acknowledgement of those who had dreamed first of the circle, and the people felt a quiet humility, an understanding that they were caretakers rather than creators, conduits rather than masters, part of a continuum stretching across centuries. By midday, the children observed that the shadows seemed more distinct when offerings were left in honor of ancestors. Small gifts of grain, carved wood, or simple clay tokens placed carefully at the base of a stone. The elders explained that these gestures were less about magic and more about intention, a respectful pause that allowed human consciousness to synchronize with the subtle memory encoded in the land and the stones. Evenings became moments of storytelling and quiet reflection. Around fires that glowed with gentle warmth, tales of distant ancestors were recounted. Those who had first traced the lines of the stars, those who had felt the pulse of the hills, those who had taught that patience and reverence were the truest tools in any labor. Each story was spoken slowly, deliberately, a lullaby of memory that blended seamlessly with the hush of night, the distant cry of owls, and the soft rustle of grass in the breeze. As darkness deepened and the stars wheeled silently above, the people lay beside the stones, hands resting lightly on cool surfaces, listening for subtle vibrations and whispers that seemed to rise from the earth itself. In these moments, they understood that the work was not merely physical construction, but a dialogue across time, a communion with those who had come before, and a promise to those yet to come. The whispers of the ancestors were not loud or commanding, but persistent and gentle, guiding, affirming, and reminding that patience, care, and reverence were the keys to creating a circle that would endure through ages. And in this quiet understanding, the people drifted into sleep, hearts aligned with stone sky and the enduring memory of those who had walked the plain long before them. By now, the stones had begun to reveal the full vision that had lived in the minds of generations. The labor of countless hands slowly manifesting the hidden geometry whispered by earth, sky, and ancestors alike. From a distance, the circle seemed simple, an arrangement of towering stones upon the soft plain. But up close, the people saw a complexity of alignment, proportion, and rhythm that spoke of both human patience and natural order. Each stone occupied its precise place, not by force alone, but by careful observation, guidance from shadows, and the subtle cooperation of the land itself. Morning work began in soft light, dew still clinging to blades of grass. Children watched quietly, their small hands clasped, absorbing the methodical cadence of lifting, nudging, and setting into place. Elders gave gentle instructions, not as commands, but as guidance, teaching patience, timing, and reverence for the stone's weight and history. The stones themselves seemed to acknowledge these efforts, their cool surfaces steady beneath hands, veins of blue and green glimmering faintly in the early sun, reminding the people of the distant hills from which they had journeyed. As the day unfolded, patterns became clearer. Shadows aligned precisely with neighboring stones, revealing the intricate connections that were otherwise invisible. The people traced these patterns repeatedly, adjusting with delicate care, listening to the faint hum of the earth, feeling the vibrations that spoke of equilibrium, and observing how the circle interacted with light, wind, and celestial markers. Every movement was intentional, every pause a lesson, and in this meticulous labor, the rhythm of the plain became a companion, guiding both thought and hand. Midday brought reflection and quiet song, voices soft yet synchronized, blending with the rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. The music carried across the stones, and the people felt subtle resonance, a confirmation of alignment and purpose. Children clapped lightly, tracing the edges of shadows, learning through play and observation, understanding that the circle was not merely physical, but a manifestation of harmony between human effort and the enduring pulse of the world. Evenings were moments of meditation. Fires glowed gently, casting long flickering shadows across the nearly complete circle. The elders spoke softly of past generations who had dreamed of this place, of the hidden currents beneath the soil, of the whispers carried by wind and stone, and of the dialogue with the heavens that had guided the work from the beginning. The stories wove together the visible and invisible, the present and past, the human and the earth, creating a tapestry that anchored the people in both place and time. As night fell and stars wheeled overhead, the people lay beside the stones, hands resting on cool surfaces, listening to subtle vibrations beneath the earth, sensing the quiet pulse that connected them to ancestors and to the enduring rhythm of the land. In this stillness, the circle revealed its purpose, its geometry, its quiet majesty, and the people understood that their labor was not merely to build, but to honor, to align, and to preserve. Each stone stood as both participant and witness, a silent testament to patience, reverence, and connection. And as the plain settled into darkness, the wind whispered softly through the standing stones, carrying faint echoes of song and breath, shadows and alignment, labor and care, and the people slept with hearts attuned to the pulse of earth and stone, knowing that the circle had taken shape not through haste or force, but through the enduring harmony of hands, hearts, and sky, a monument to the quiet power of human patience and the soft, eternal guidance of the natural world. With the circle increasingly complete, the people began to introduce subtle rituals designed to honor both the stones and the forces that guided them. Quiet practices that helped the work feel less like labor and more like conversation with the earth. At dawn, small groups would move slowly among the stones, touching surfaces lightly, murmuring soft words of acknowledgement, and observing angles where sunlight fell most clearly. The elders explained that these rituals were not mere superstition, but careful attentiveness, a method of aligning human intention with natural and cosmic order, and that each gesture reinforced the connection between people and stone. Children followed closely, learning by watching, placing their hands on the cool surfaces, noticing how the veins in the blue stones seemed to shimmer faintly in early light, sensing the subtle vibrations beneath the soil. The elders spoke of these vibrations as a kind of memory held by the stones, a record of the care and attention of those who had touched them, and they encouraged the young to move with patience, to pause and observe, before acting, understanding that every small touch carried significance. Midday brought quiet reflection. Workers would gather at key points in the circle, aligning stones with measured care, marking shadows with sticks or small stones, and humming softly, a practice that seemed to enhance the natural resonance of the plain. The elders explained that the alignment of sound and motion was a subtle guide, a way to coordinate effort with rhythm of earth and sky, and that each correct placement strengthened the integrity of the circle as a whole. Offerings became part of the ritual, sprigs of heather, bowls of water, small carvings, left with reverence at the base of stones. These gestures were quiet acknowledgements, a gentle expression of gratitude for the land's guidance, and a reminder that the labor was as much spiritual as it was physical. The children watched carefully, learning that respect and intention were inseparable from action, that every motion of lifting, pushing, or adjusting was part of a larger dialogue with the world. Evenings were devoted to meditation beside the stones. Fires glowed low, shadows stretching across the plain, and stories were told of ancestors, of distant hills where blue stones had rested for centuries, and of those who had first dreamed of the circle. The soft songs and whispers carried through the cool night air, blending with the rustle of grass, the faint call of night birds, and the vibration of the earth beneath, creating a gentle symphony that resonated deep within all who listened. Through these rituals, The circle became more than a collection of stones. It became a living system, a reflection of care, observation, and alignment. The people began to understand that patience and reverence were as important as strength and skill, and that their work was a partnership with the land itself, guided by the quiet wisdom of ancestors and the subtle forces that shaped both stone and soil. As night fell and the stars wheeled silently overhead, the people lay beside the stones, feeling the cool surfaces beneath their hands, sensing faint pulses through the ground, and knowing that through these rituals, they had strengthened not only the circle, but the connection between human effort and the enduring rhythm of the natural world. And in that stillness, hearts and hands rested ready to greet the next day with reverence and care. As the circle grew more complete, the people began to notice the quiet, unchanging rhythm of seasons, and how the stones themselves seemed to respond to the slow passage of time. Spring brought soft rain, making the earth beneath the standing stones rich and fragrant, a scent that mingled with the fresh green of new grass. Summer stretched long and golden, with sunlight tracing familiar paths across the circle, illuminating the veins and hues within the blue stones, reminding the people of distant hills from which they had journeyed. Autumn painted the plain with amber and copper tones, shadows lengthening, air crisp and clear, while winter covered the stones in frost, softening their edges and teaching the people patience, endurance, and quiet reflection. Each season became a teacher. In spring, the earth's soft give reminded them to lift carefully, to sense the hidden currents beneath their feet. In summer, long shadows revealed alignments they had not yet noticed, subtle cues that guided the placement of new stones or minor adjustments to existing ones. Autumn whispered lessons in balance, the changing light emphasizing angles and alignments that shifted imperceptibly with the sun's tilt. And winter brought silence, allowing them to observe the stars and reflect on the circle's purpose without distraction. The children were attuned to these rhythms, noting how the position of the moon changed from month to month, how stars rose and fell in slightly different patterns, how frost or dew altered the sound of footsteps across the plain. Elders encouraged them to mark these changes, to track them with sticks, stones, or clay tablets, teaching that understanding the seasons was essential to aligning not only the circle but life itself with the natural world. Daily work incorporated this awareness. Stones were moved or adjusted in harmony with seasonal light, their shadows tracked carefully, and small rituals were performed to honor the land's shifting temperament. Offerings were left at each solstice, bowls of water, sprigs of plants, tokens of grain or stone, gestures of respect that acknowledged the cooperation of the land, sun, and sky. Even the wind became a guide, its direction and intensity shaping the placement of lighter stones, or the timing of movement, its gentle pressure reminding the people of the delicate balance between effort and guidance. Songs adapted to the seasons, soft chants echoing the gentle warmth of summer or the cool stillness of winter, blending with the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, or the quiet hiss of frost. Every note carried a dual purpose: to synchronize human effort with the earth and to honor the enduring presence of the stones, each sound tracing invisible lines of connection between sky, land, and human intention. As evening fell, the circle became a reflection of both time and patience, the long shadows stretching across the plain forming temporary patterns, temporary lessons that shifted with the next sunrise. People lay beside the stones, hands resting lightly, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath their palms, sensing the quiet pulse of seasons unfolding, and understanding that the circle was a living testament to human observation, care, and harmony with the slow, inevitable rhythm of nature. Through the passing seasons, the stones taught the people humility, patience, and respect for cycles beyond human control. And as the stars wheeled silently overhead, they drifted into sleep beside the circle, hearts attuned to both the enduring rhythm of the earth and the quiet, eternal presence of the stones, ready to greet each new season with reverence, observation, and care. As the circle approached its final stages of completion, the people began to turn their attention upward, to the endless dome of sky above, and to the movements of sun, moon, and stars that had long guided their labor. The elders spoke softly of celestial rhythms, of solstices and equinoxes, of lunar cycles and the slow drift of constellations across the heavens, and they taught that understanding these patterns was as important as aligning stones or tracing shadows, for the sky itself was part of the circle's silent dialogue. At dawn, small groups would rise before the sun, eyes lifted to the horizon, following the first rays as they touched the edges of stones, observing how angles shifted imperceptibly with each passing day. Children learned to watch carefully, noting the tilt of the sun, the color of morning light, the faint shimmer on the distant hills, and they began to sense that the circle was not merely an arrangement of rock upon earth, but a bridge between human effort and cosmic order. The people discovered that certain stones aligned precisely with sunrise or sunset at key times of the year, their shadows tracing paths that intersected with neighboring stones, revealing hidden geometry encoded in both sky and soil. Gentle chants accompanied these observations, rising and falling with the light, blending with the rustle of grass and the hum of the earth, creating a resonance that seemed to carry both intention and confirmation. The elders explained that the circle's harmony was not complete until it responded to the sky, until human labor, earth and stone moved in subtle agreement with celestial rhythms. Offerings were placed at moments of alignment: water bowls, sprigs of fragrant plants, and small tokens of clay or stone, gestures that acknowledged the guidance of sun and stars, honoring the invisible forces that shaped both day and night. Children watched carefully, learning that respect extended beyond human and stone to sky itself, and that every careful observation, every whispered song, was a part of a larger conversation spanning land, stone, and cosmos. Evenings were devoted to quiet contemplation beneath the emerging stars. Fires glowed softly, illuminating faces and the textures of stone, and the people shared stories of distant constellations, myths carried through generations, and the subtle ways the heavens had guided labor and life for countless years. Songs echoed faintly across the plain, harmonizing with night wind and whispering leaves, weaving an invisible thread that connected human hearts to the eternal cycles above. Through these observations, the circle gained new significance. No longer merely a collection of stones, it became a map of sky and earth, a reflection of patience, care, and cosmic rhythm, a testament to the quiet power of alignment, observation, and reverence. And as the night deepened, the people lay beside the stones, hands resting on cool surfaces, sensing faint vibrations beneath the soil, feeling the connection between themselves, the stones, and the infinite expanse above, drifting into sleep with hearts attuned to the enduring dance of stone and sky. By the time the circle had reached near completion, the people discovered that the stones themselves seemed to respond to sound, not in the way of music that humans played for pleasure, but through subtle vibrations that resonated through rock and earth, gentle hums that could be felt rather than heard. The elders taught that these were the songs of stone, ancient echoes of the land's memory, waiting for patient hands and attentive hearts to awaken them. Early each morning, small groups knelt beside the stones, running fingertips along cool surfaces, tapping lightly with soft sticks, humming low tones in quiet harmony. Children joined, wide-eyed, curious, feeling the faint tremor that traveled from hand to stone to earth. It was as if the stones had stories to tell, not with words but with resonance, rhythms that spoke of origin, journey, and placement. The elders reminded them that sound was another form of observation, a bridge between human intention and the enduring presence of rock. Midday work became synchronized with these vibrations. Lifting and nudging stones required more than strength. It demanded listening. Workers hummed softly as they pushed a stone into place, each note tracing lines through air and earth, guiding subtle adjustments, enhancing alignment. Mistakes were rare because the stones themselves provided feedback, vibrating in ways that suggested minor corrections or confirming the right position. Even the wind and rustle of grass seemed to join the symphony, responding to these quiet songs with gentle echoes. Offerings were often accompanied by song, small chants, whispered harmonics, or soft rhythmic claps that echoed across the plain. The children learned to sense the difference between sounds that harmonized and those that did not, noticing how the circle seemed to hum back in subtle confirmation. The elders explained that stone was alive in a way that transcended motion and sight, responding to rhythm, care, and attention, and that the act of listening was as important as the act of shaping. Evenings became a time for deliberate resonance. Around gentle fires, groups would sing softly, tapping lightly on stones or earth, tracing faint lines with fingers, feeling the vibrations carry through the ground. The stories of ancestors blended with these sounds, tales of first dreamers, of distant hills, of the long journey of each stone. The plain seemed to breathe with them, hum in harmony, and the children lay with hands resting lightly on cool surfaces, sensing the subtle pulse of rock beneath, understanding that song was another form of dialogue. Through this practice, the circle gained life beyond its physical form. Each stone carried memory, alignment, and resonance, all amplified through careful attention to the songs that arose from human care. And as the night deepened, the people lay beside the stones, humming softly to themselves, breathing with the rhythm of earth and stone, letting the subtle resonance guide them into sleep hearts, attuned to the quiet, enduring song of a place built through patience, care, and the gentle music of stone. As the people continued their work, they became aware that the plain beneath their feet held hidden life, subtle channels and ancient waterways that shaped the flow of energy, water, and even stone. Small depressions, the firmness of soil, and faint murmurs beneath the surface suggested that the land itself had memory that past floods, rains, and currents had carved unseen paths, guiding not only the placement of the stones, but the labor of those who moved them. The elders called these the veins of the earth, and taught that understanding them was essential to the circle's harmony. Mornings were spent observing soil, listening to faint trickles of water, and placing stones with attention to the unseen currents below. Children learned to feel the ground with bare feet, noticing soft patches where water lingered, firmer ridges where the earth had dried, and subtle vibrations that hinted at hidden channels. Every movement, every adjustment of a stone was guided by this quiet knowledge, teaching patience, mindfulness, and reverence for forces beyond sight. Midday brought careful reflection on alignment. Stones were nudged slightly to accommodate unseen flows. Grooves in the soil were followed to guide placement, and small offerings of water were poured into natural depressions, gestures of gratitude for the land's subtle cooperation. The elders explained that the hidden waterways were not merely physical, but spiritual guides, encouraging harmony between human effort and the enduring rhythm of the plain. Evenings were reserved for quiet observation. Fires glowed low, reflecting off the blue stones, while soft murmurs of conversation mixed with the rustle of grass and the faint trickle of hidden water beneath. Children traced patterns in wet soil, sensing where underground streams might run, imagining the long journey of water beneath stone, learning that awareness of these unseen elements allowed the circle to exist in harmony with both visible and hidden forces. As night deepened, the people rested beside the stones, hands lightly touching cool surfaces, ears attuned to the faint murmurs beneath, hearts open to the subtle dialogue between earth, water, and human care. They sensed that the circle was no longer merely a construction of stone, but a living entity connected to the land's veins, the hidden currents, and the quiet, enduring pulse of nature itself. Through this understanding, they learned humility, patience, and the profound importance of listening. And as stars wheeled silently above, they drifted into sleep, hearts and minds aligned with both the stones they had set and the unseen waterways beneath, carrying the gentle, persistent wisdom of the plain into dreams and the quiet night ahead. With the circle nearly complete, the people began to hold gentle ceremonies to honor the movements of the sun and moon, observing their rising, setting, and passing across the heavens with careful attention. These gatherings were not grand or loud, but quiet, deliberate acts of reverence, designed to connect human intention with the celestial rhythms that had long guided labor and life. Elders instructed that the timing of these ceremonies was crucial, aligning offerings, songs, and gestures with precise angles of light and shadow. In the early mornings, groups would gather at key points in the circle, watching as the first rays of sunlight touched the blue stones. Children stood quietly beside them, learning to notice subtle shifts in color and shadow, sensing how even the smallest adjustment could create harmony or misalignment. The elders spoke softly of solstices and equinoxes, of lunar phases, and the slow progression of stars, emphasizing that the circle was a map not only of earth but of sky, and that human presence could honor these movements through mindful observation. During midday, the work of alignment continued with gentle accompaniment. Stones were nudged slightly to correspond with solar paths, offerings of water, grain, and small carved tokens were placed in thoughtful patterns, and soft chants rose and fell with the movement of sunlight. The children learned that ceremony was not just ritual, it was careful observation, a partnership with the cosmos, and a way of acknowledging that the land and sky were intertwined with human labor and intention. Evening ceremonies were equally deliberate. Fires glowed low, casting long shadows across the plain as the moon rose slowly, its silver light tracing new angles across the stones. The people sang softly, harmonizing with the rhythm of night wind, whispering thanks for guidance from sun and moon, and noticing how celestial reflections on the stones revealed alignments invisible by day. Through these quiet acts, the circle became more than stone. It became a living testament to patience, care, and connection across time and space. Stories accompanied each ceremony, tales of distant ancestors who had first noticed the sun's path, of generations who had interpreted moonlight to guide labor, and of the subtle wisdom that arises from attentive observation. Children traced faint lines in the soil, imagining invisible pathways of light, understanding that every action, every pause, and every song was part of a larger dialogue between earth, stone, and sky. By nightfall, the circle seemed to breathe in harmony with the heavens, its stones reflecting faint lunar light, resonating with soft human song and pulsing with the quiet energy of centuries. The people rested beside the stones, hands lightly touching cool surfaces, hearts attuned to both the enduring rhythm of the earth and the celestial patterns above. In this calm, meditative state, they drifted into sleep, carrying with them the gentle knowledge that human care, observation, and reverence could align with the sun, moon, and stars, creating harmony across both land and sky. As the circle neared completion, the elders spoke often of intuition, the quiet, unspoken understanding that guided human hands and hearts in harmony with stone, earth, and sky. They taught that experience, observation, and patient listening could not account for everything. Sometimes, one had to trust the subtle sense of what felt right, the gentle pull of alignment, the faint hum of stone beneath fingertips that whispered guidance beyond reason. Each morning, the people rose before dawn, feeling the cool air and soft earth beneath their feet, letting instinct guide them as they traced the shadows, observed subtle shifts in wind, or sensed the hidden currents beneath the soil. Children, wide-eyed and curious, were encouraged to follow their instincts too, learning that observation and patience prepared them to hear the quiet voice of intuition, that the subtle suggestion of what must be done often arrived without words, but with clarity unmistakable to those who listened. Midday work became a dialogue between conscious effort and instinct. Stones were lifted, nudged, and set not only according to measured lines, but according to a sense of balance and flow, a knowing that arose from years of observing shadows, light, sound, and vibration. Elders reminded all that intuition was not arbitrary. It was the culmination of generations of careful attention, a synthesis of skill, knowledge, and sensitivity to the land and stone. Even slight hesitation was observed as an opportunity to reflect, to feel the stone, to sense its readiness, and to align human intention with its silent guidance. Offerings and quiet songs continued to accompany this process. Each gesture, each hum or whisper was infused with awareness, enhancing the connection between human and stone, between the laborer's heart and the enduring pulse of the land. Children began to notice that stones seemed to respond more readily when they moved with gentle confidence, when hands were steady, and when hearts were open to guidance beyond sight. Evenings became moments for reflection, stories, and teaching. Fires glowed low, casting soft illumination on faces and stones alike. Elders shared stories of ancestors who had trusted intuition to find perfect alignment, of subtle corrections guided by instinct rather than measurement, and of the quiet satisfaction of labor performed in harmony with unseen forces. Children listened closely, feeling the rhythm of the plain, sensing the hum of earth beneath, and beginning to cultivate their own awareness of the quiet guidance that intuition offered. As night settled over the plain, the people lay beside the stones, hands lightly touching cool surfaces, eyes gazing at the stars above, hearts attuned to the quiet wisdom that comes from listening deeply and trusting subtle instincts. In this stillness, they understood that true mastery arose not solely from strength, knowledge, or observation, but from the gentle alignment of mind, body, and intuition with the enduring pulse of earth and stone. And with this understanding, sleep came softly, carrying them into dreams intertwined with stone, sky, and quiet human reverence. As the circle grew ever closer to its final form, the people began to perceive the broader landscape surrounding the plain, the rolling hills, distant rivers, and low-lying valleys that stretched beyond sight. They understood that the circle did not exist in isolation, but as part of a larger harmony, a quiet dialogue between the standing stones and the horizon itself. Elders spoke softly of perspective, teaching that alignment was not only measured in inches or shadows, but in relation to the distant hills, the curve of the land, and the passage of light across the entire panorama. Morning work often began with gazes lifted toward the horizon, observing the gentle slopes and subtle rises that influenced the placement of each stone. Children learned to notice the way sunlight traveled across distant ridges, how clouds traced slow arcs overhead, and how wind patterns shifted as it crossed the plain. The elders explained that the horizon was a constant companion, a guide that extended beyond immediate labor, reminding them that the circle was part of a vast, living landscape, interconnected with every hill and hollow. Midday brought careful adjustments, nudging stones ever so slightly to align with distant points, noticing how angles shifted with perspective, and observing how shadows reached across the plain in patterns invisible from close range. Soft chants and whispers accompanied these adjustments, blending with the hum of the earth and the faint rush of wind across grass, a symphony of human presence harmonizing with the broader environment. Children traced lines in the soil, imagining invisible connections stretching toward hills and rivers, learning that the circle's purpose was intertwined with the land beyond its immediate boundary. Offerings continued to play a role, placed with quiet intention at stones that faced particular points on the horizon. Gestures of respect for the unseen forces that shaped both land and labor. Elders reminded all that these were not acts of magic, but mindful acknowledgement of the broader context, a recognition that human effort was part of a larger order, a delicate web connecting stone, earth, sky, and distant horizons. Evenings were moments of reflection and storytelling. Fires glowed softly, and the people recounted tales of ancestors who had traveled these hills, of journeys across valleys, and of the subtle ways distant landscapes influence labor and alignment. Children learned that every stone, shadow, and gesture was part of a conversation reaching far beyond the plain, teaching them humility, observation, and reverence for the interconnectedness of all things. As night settled, the stars wheeled above the circle and the distant hills, and the people lay beside the stone's hands, resting lightly, feeling subtle vibrations beneath their palms. Hearts attuned not only to the immediate pulse of earth and stone, but to the broader rhythm of the landscape and horizon. And in this quiet understanding, sleep came gently, carrying dreams of alignment, harmony, and the gentle dialogue between human care and the vast, enduring sweep of land and sky. As the circle approached completion, the people began to sense a quiet presence around them, subtle and enduring, a feeling that they were watched over not by eyes, but by the enduring spirit of the land and the stones themselves. The elders spoke softly of these invisible guardians, not as spirits of legend, but as the accumulated memory of generations, the silent resonance of every hand that had touched the earth, every song that had risen into the wind, every careful observation and patient movement that had guided the stones to their place. Morning brought gentle walks among the standing stones, listening for faint echoes, observing subtle shifts in light, feeling vibrations beneath fingertips that seemed to carry advice or reassurance. Children followed quiet and attentive, sensing the presence of something beyond the visible, learning that labor and reverence were inseparable, and that patience, attentiveness, and care were the ways to honor the quiet guardians who had always watched over the plain. Midday work became a conversation of rhythm and touch. Stones were nudged into precise positions, shadows traced and retraced, and every small sound, a hum, a tap, a whispered word, was offered in respect to these unseen companions. Elders explained that the guardians were neither commanding nor punitive. They were witnesses, guides, and reminders of continuity, a gentle presence that encouraged harmony, balance, and careful attention. Offerings were subtle: bowls of water, sprigs of heather, small tokens of clay placed carefully at the base of prominent stones. Children observed, learning that these acts were acknowledgements, not transactions. Gestures of gratitude for the invisible wisdom that permeated the plain. Even the wind seemed to participate, brushing softly across grass and stone, carrying the quiet song of guardians, a melody that resonated through both earth and human hearts. Evenings were moments of contemplation beside fires that glowed low, illuminating faces and stones alike. Stories were told of ancestors who had first felt the guardian's presence, of subtle guidance that shaped alignment and labor, and of the gentle lessons in patience and reverence passed down across generations. Children learned to listen, not only with ears, but with hearts and hands, feeling the connection that bound human effort, stone, and the silent watchers of the plain. As night deepened and stars wheeled overhead, the people lay beside the stones, hands resting lightly, sensing faint vibrations, the subtle pulse of memory and care that stretched across centuries. In this stillness, they understood that the circle was not solely a work of human hands, but a living dialogue with the quiet guardians of the land, a testimony to reverence, patience, and enduring presence. And in this awareness, sleep arrived gently, carrying hearts into dreams infused with the subtle, watchful pulse of the earth, stone, and the quiet guardians who had guided them unseen. At last, the labor of generations drew to its quiet conclusion. The stones stood fully in place, aligned with precision born of observation, intuition, and careful guidance from earth, sky, and unseen currents beneath the plain. From a distance, the circle appeared simple, an arrangement of towering rocks upon gentle grass, but up close it revealed the accumulated care of countless hands, the subtle patterns of shadow and light, the resonance of stone and earth, and the quiet dialogue of human reverence. Morning light revealed the final alignments, subtle angles and shadow paths that could be felt more than seen. Children ran lightly among the stones, touching cool surfaces, sensing faint vibrations, learning that the circle was alive not in motion, but in memory, connection, and quiet energy. The elders moved with calm, deliberate gestures, observing, confirming, and guiding, their eyes reflecting the pride and serenity of having nurtured a vision from dream to enduring reality. Midday brought reflection on the work completed. Stones were touched lightly, offerings placed, soft songs sung in honor of both labor and land. Every action, from lifting to alignment, had been guided by care, intuition, and observation. And now the circle stood as a testament to the patient, reverent efforts of all who had participated. The children learned that completion was not merely an end, but a transition into lasting harmony, a preservation of lessons, and a quiet connection between generations. Evening settled gently over the plain, shadows stretching long and soft across the standing stones. Fires glowed low, illuminating faces and textures of rock, while whispers of song and story traced the lineage of effort, the dreams of ancestors, and the careful guidance that had shaped each stone. The circle seemed to breathe in the cool night air, reflecting faint moonlight, echoing the soft resonance of wind, earth, and human heart. As night deepened, the people lay beside the stones, hands resting on cool surfaces, ears attuned to subtle vibrations beneath, eyes lifted toward the stars. Hearts understood that the circle was more than stones. It was memory, guidance, patience, reverence, and harmony. It was the culmination of quiet observation, intimate connection with land, sky, and unseen currents, and the enduring imprint of human care across centuries. In the stillness, the plain held both work and worship, labor and love, alignment and reflection. The circle stood as a monument not to force or grandeur, but to patience, humility, and attentive devotion. And as the people drifted into sleep, their dreams were filled with gentle echoes of stone earth sky and the subtle eternal pulse of harmony, carrying them softly into the quiet night hearts and hands, attuned to the silent enduring wisdom of a circle built with reverence and care.